There's one number that tells you the exact moment the market starts working harder than your paycheck. For someone investing $300 a month, that number is about $51,400. Not a feeling. Not a vague milestone. A real number you can calculate on a napkin. And here's the brutal part. Most people reach that point at around year 10. That's also the year many of them quit. They walk away at the exact moment the math is finally about to turn in their favor. That sounds dramatic, so let's prove it. Meet Lisa. She's 28, works in operations, and earns about $58,000 a year. After rent, groceries, her car, and her phone bill, she has about $400 left each month. She decides to invest $300 a month into a broad market index fund and live on the rest. No stock picking. No market timing. Just the same $300 every month into the same broad fund. Now let's lock the variables so the math has nowhere to hide. Same job. Same salary. Same $300 a month. Same broad market index. Same 7% real return. Same 30-year timeline. And that word real matters. Historically, the S&P 500 has returned about 10% a year before inflation. But inflation quietly eats away about 3% of your purchasing power each year. So if you strip that out, the growth that actually buys you more life, more house, more groceries, more freedom, is closer to 7%. That's the number we're using. Not the flashy headline return. The honest, after inflation return. With everything else held constant, only one thing changes over time. The balance in the account. And that's the entire story. When people imagine saving, they imagine a straight line. $300 a month is $3,600 a year. 10 years is $36,000. 20 years is $72,000. 30 years is $108,000. Clean. Predictable. Linear. That's the contribution line, the money Lisa personally puts in. And that's exactly why people misunderstand compounding. Your brain expects progress to move in a straight line. You put in $300, so you expect to see about $300 worth of progress. You picture a steady ramp climbing upward forever. But compounding doesn't move in a straight line. It moves in a curve. A curve that begins almost flat, then slowly bends upward, and eventually starts rising fast. In the early years, that curve hugs the straight contribution line so closely that they look almost identical. That's the trap. Because by the time the curve finally starts pulling away, most people have already decided nothing is happening and they quit. So let's look at Lisa's first 10 years, because this is where most people lose faith. At the end of year 1, she has contributed $3,600. The market has added about $118. That's it. After 12 full months of discipline, the reward feels tiny. By year 3, her total market gain for the year is only around $700, roughly $60 a month. That's almost invisible next to the $300 she's putting in herself. By year 5, she has contributed $18,000. Her account balance is around $21,500. Her market gain for that year is about $1,300. That's about $100 a month. It's real progress. She's beating inflation, which is the whole point. But emotionally, it still feels small. By year 10, Lisa has put in $36,000 of her own money. Her balance is roughly $52,000. Over that decade, the market has added around $16,000 total. And in year 10 alone, the market gain is about $3,400. Still just shy of the $3,600 she personally contributed that year. So Lisa sits at her kitchen table and does the honest math. I put in $36,000 of my own money over 10 years, and I've only got about $16,000 in market gains to show for it. And if she had spent that decade chasing hot stocks instead, plenty of people would tell her she played it too safe. This is the exact point where many people quit. And almost nobody explains what they're standing on top of. Here's the mechanism underneath that flat first decade. Compound growth doesn't run on what you put in. It runs on what's already there. 7% of a small balance is a small number of dollars. 7% of $10,000 is $700. 7% of $50,000 is $3,500. 7% of $250,000 is $17,500. Same percentage. Completely different dollar amounts. The only difference is the size of the pile it's working on. That's why the first few years feel so weak. The percentage has almost nothing to grab onto. But every year, the balance gets a little bigger. So the gain gets a little bigger. And that bigger gain gets added back into the balance. Which makes the next year's gain even bigger. So the growth compounds, but so does the speed of the growth. Look at Lisa's annual market gains over time. In year 20, the market adds about $10,000. In year 30, it adds about $24,000. That's about $14,000 more per year, even though the return is still the exact same 7%. The growth isn't just increasing. It's accelerating. So where exactly does the flip happen? The question is simple. How large does the account need to be before 1 year of market growth equals 1 full year of Lisa's own contributions? She contributes $3,600 a year. The market returns 7%. So set them equal. Balance times 7% equals $3,600. Solve for balance. $3,600 divided by 0.07 equals $51,429. That's the line. Below that number, Lisa's paycheck is doing more work than the market. Above that number, the market is doing more work than Lisa can do herself. That's the crossover point. And it isn't a guess. It's one simple equation. Your annual contribution divided by your expected return. Change either number, and your line moves. Now here's the part that should bother you. When does Lisa cross that line? Year 10. The exact moment she was most tempted to quit was the exact moment she finally reached the balance where the market was about to start carrying more of the load. The people who quit at year 10 usually aren't quitting because the strategy failed. They're quitting one step before the payoff begins, because compounding is backloaded. The reward shows up right after the part that tests you. That one number gives you a simple map with 3 levels. 1. The starter floor. Anything below $51,400. Here, your own paycheck is still doing most of the work. It feels more like saving than investing because the compounding effect is still hard to notice. For many people, this is where they spend the entire first decade. 2. The crossover point. Around $51,400. This is the first moment where the market's yearly gain matches your yearly contribution. The account is finally pulling its own weight. 3. Catch fire. Ask the same equation. A bigger question. When does the market make 5 times your yearly contribution? That number is about 5 times $51,400 equals $257,000. At that balance, 7% gives you about $18,000 a year, 5 times the $3,600 you're putting in. At that point, your own contribution has become a rounding error. The account is doing the heavy lifting. Now here's the part that feels almost unfair. Not every dollar Lisa invests is equally valuable. A dollar invested in year 1 has 30 full years to grow. At 7%, it becomes roughly $8 by the end. A dollar invested in the last month has almost no time to grow. It's still worth about $1. Same dollar. Same fund. Same investor. The difference is time. Now scale that up. The $18,000 Lisa contributes in her first 5 years grows to about $123,000 by year 30. The $54,000 she contributes in her last 15 years, 3 times as much money, grows to only about $95,000 by year 30. Read that again. Her first $18,000 beats her final $54,000. Her earliest dollars outperform her latest dollars with only 1/3 of the money. That's why investing success is not mostly about how much you invest. It's about how long your dollars get to work. Now let's zoom out and ask. Where do real households actually stand? According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, among households that have a retirement account at all, the median balances look roughly like this. Under 35, about $18,000. 35 to 44, about $45,000. 45 to 54, about $115,000. 55 to 64, about $185,000. That $45,000 figure for ages 35 to 44 is important. It's still below the crossover line. So the typical household in that age range hasn't even reached the point where the market is out-earning their own contributions yet. And there's an even harder truth behind those numbers. Those medians only include households that have a retirement account. Nearly half of American households don't. For them, there is no line to cross, because there is no invested pile working at all. So this isn't just a willpower story. A lot of people are doing the right thing, putting real money into real accounts, and still feeling discouraged because the visible payoff comes so late. Now go back to Lisa at year 10 and split the story into 2 versions. In the first version, she quits. Not in some dramatic way, she just stops contributing. Life gets busy. A car repair comes up. The $300 feels pointless after a decade of slow progress. She leaves the money invested and moves on. In the second version, she does nothing heroic at all. She simply keeps going. Same fund. Same $300. Same boring plan. 20 years later. Lisa, who stopped contributing, ends up with about $210,000. Lisa, who kept going, ends up with about $366,000. That's a gap of roughly $156,000. She didn't get that extra money by working harder, earning more, or picking better investments. She got it by not stepping off the line right when the math was finally turning in her favor. By year 15, her balance is around $95,000, and the market's annual gain, about $6,300, is now permanently larger than her own yearly contribution. From that point on, the market is the bigger contributor every single year. By year 20, her balance is around $156,000, and the market adds roughly $10,400 a year, nearly 3 times what she puts in. By year 25, her balance is about $243,000, almost at the catch-fire mark. Nothing magical changed. The market didn't get better. The returns stayed the same. The only thing that changed was that the pile got big enough for the percentage to matter. And if early dollars matter the most, then here's the most expensive mistake many people make. Not quitting, waiting. Say Lisa doesn't quit at all. She just starts 1 year later. She starts at 29 instead of 28. Everything else is identical. That single year of delay costs her roughly $28,000 by the end. Think about that. She skipped investing $3,600, but the long-term cost was nearly 8 times that amount. Why? Because the dollars she skipped were the ones that would have had the longest runway to compound. That's the real lesson. The most expensive year of your investing life usually isn't a crash year. It's the year you sat out and didn't start. Now, to be fair, there are real situations where this story changes. If you can't stay invested, the math breaks. If you need the money at year 12 for a down payment, then you're leaving early, before the compounding curve does its best work. Fees matter too. A 1% expense ratio sounds small, but over 30 years it can quietly drain about $65,000 from Lisa's ending balance, roughly 17% of the total. The line still exists, but it moves farther away. Lower returns matter as well. If Lisa earns 5% real returns instead of 7%, the crossover line rises to about $72,000, and her 30-year ending balance falls from about $366,000 to around $250,000. Same basic shape. Slower climb. Starting late matters even more. If Lisa waits until 43 and then tries to catch up by investing $600 a month, after 15 years she ends up with only about $190,000. She still never reaches the catch-fire stage during her working life. To match the outcome of the version of herself who started at 28 with just $300 a month, the 43-year-old Lisa would have to invest almost $600 a month for 22 straight years. That means contributing far more money just to compensate for the one thing she can't replace: time. And one last honest point. The market does not deliver a smooth 7% every single year. That's an average. Some years it gives you 20%. Some years it takes away 15%. The sequence matters. But over a few decades in a broad index fund, the crossover logic still holds. The line is real. The ride to it just isn't smooth. By year 30, Lisa has contributed $108,000 of her own money. Her account is worth about $366,000. And the market adds about $24,500 in year 30 alone. Say that out loud. In a single year, the market gave her almost 7 times what she personally contributed that year. It gave her more in 1 year than it gave her during her entire first decade combined. In year 1, the market added about $118. In year 30, it added about $24,500. That's more than 200 times the dollar growth from the same 7%, the same fund, and the same $300 a month. The only difference was the size of the balance. That's what people mean when they say compounding catches fire. It's not a metaphor. It's simply what 7% does to a large balance, instead of a tiny one. And once an account crosses the catch-fire stage, it can start doubling roughly every decade on the strength of the market alone, with or without your extra $300 a month. That's the far side of the curve most people never get to see in their own lives, because they stepped off it years earlier, convinced nothing was happening. So here's the trap as plainly as possible. It's not saving too little. It's not picking the wrong fund. It's not even a lack of discipline. The trap is using your first 10 years as evidence, and quitting before compounding reaches the part you were actually waiting for. Compounding doesn't trick you. It just refuses to show you in year 5 what year 25 is going to feel like. The people who win at this usually aren't smarter. They didn't earn more. They didn't find a secret. They simply stayed on the line long enough for the percentage to finally have real dollars to work on. So here's the only question that matters. Where is your line? Not Lisa's. Yours. Your crossover depends on just 2 numbers. How much you contribute. What return you expect to earn. Put those into the equation, and you can figure out your own crossover balance, what rung you're standing on today, and roughly when the market will start out earning your paycheck. That's the moment the whole game changes.